Welcome to an audiobook entitled Parish Management and Operations, The Buck Stops Here, narrated by Catholic author Michael Brinda. We hope you enjoy the segment and find it useful in your ministerial work.
Chapter 35, on the primacy of hat switching. Unless you already possess some very specific prior work experience, you probably are not yet fully dialed in as to the speed of the administrative management or supervisory hat switching that is required of you in PMO. 5 critical points might remain cloudy, muddled, jumbled, but addressing these points is personal in nature, and therefore you must sort them out for yourself. Point number 1. Nobody owns just one hat. So by definition, hat switching and communication clarity becomes a necessity. But what is the total number of hats you own today? Number 2, no matter how many hats you own, do you own all the different hats that are necessary to be superior at your PMO administrative job? Owning a bunch of hats that do not lend themselves to the work done in PMO is clutter that must be sorted. Number 3, do you recognize the need to hat switch? Constantly imaging to anyone and everyone 24/7, for example, the I am your friend hat, is going to create confusion and an unnecessary mountain of problems for you. Number 4, how fast can you switch from one hat to another? If the person you are communicating with does not recognize you have switched hats, because in fact you have not yet done so in his or her eyes, you are just adding to the confusion and consternation. And number 5, do you own the talent, not just the hat label, but also the actual talent required to operate under every hat that each of your respective responsibilities requires you to wear? If at this moment you know you do not know the answer to these questions, stop, look in the mirror, find out, but do not try to fake it. If you need a basic accounting class, for example, find a book or an online class, but do not remain ignorant of core knowledge required to be a superior PMO administrator when it is your job to be a superior PMO administrator. Make the time and go find the knowledge you need, or do not occupy that box on the org chart. The answers you provide to the above 5 points are paramount to observing a broken culture, then killing it and installing a correct one. Why? Because the hat you choose to wear controls the optics through which you choose to see. How so? When you grind beef, do you expect to see pork exit the grinder? No. So, what you put into the grinder is fundamentally what comes out. As such, you must first build in PMO cultures what others with lesser skills need only manage after you and I are long gone from this earth. Culture builders are extremely rare, but obviously extremely necessary. In your mind, if you visualize your parish too simply, just as an ongoing operation, and believe what is written above is not applicable because your parish is in business accounting jargon and established ongoing concern, I suggest you think again. You have bought into an illusion, for in all likelihood very little of serious consequence exists now as it should be or could be. You must build it. And as you know, the foundation of building superior PMO is furthered by building the correct culture, and this is done in part by wearing the right hat at the right time, presented to the right people. We call this hat switching. It is only when you put the correct culture into the PMO grinder with all the necessary ingredients that you will experience the superior PMO results output you are seeking. However, you will never be totally effective in your respective positions unless you accept and master what follows. I say master what follows because it takes practice to hat switch and much skill to operate effectively wearing a variety of hats, while always wearing your ordained hat, if this applies to you. Is acquiring the science, the technical skills, our great challenge in this carousel of hat switching? No, not even close. What is the great challenge in this context? The art of choosing the correct hat for the task at hand, then switching to the next hat, and to the next, and to the next, and so forth. This is the greatest challenge for the PMO administrator. The notion that you need encyclopedic knowledge of the science of PMO is simply wrong. Flush that thought from your mind. The science of PMO is relatively easy. It is practicing the art of anything that is your greatest challenge. This point helps explain why there are so many technically competent people in any field or profession, but so few have become superior administrators or leaders. Why? Because they failed to master the art of practicing their craft, and intrinsic to mastering their craft is the art of hat switching. You must further develop the hat switch skill and further develop the art and science skills each hat represents that you do not already own today. For example, to the extent you must at times throughout the day wear the innovator hat and think like an innovator, are you comfortable with that innovator hat right now? Do you even mentally own a hat labeled innovative thinker? Do you consider yourself an innovative problem solver or a hidebound rule follower who lacks both imagination and even the slightest willingness to take calculated risks? Do not channel here images of childhood, adolescent paper routes or the adult-level equivalent of a paper route problem solving and lay claim to owning the PMO administrator innovator hat. PMO is more complex with more dimensions than a paper route. Note the reason innovation in PMO today is critically lacking is because mostly non-innovative people apply the same tired processes as their solution to chronic problems with predictably poor results. Most importantly, do you know how to effectively operate while wearing any hat, or worse, just think you do when the reality is vastly different? Look in the mirror. It's mirror check time. It is the same line of questions and analysis for every hat on the administrator's hat rack. But what happens most often in PMO? The current PMO administrator is not hat switching. Not to mention he or she has one very well-worn hat on his rack, the default hat he wants to wear in every circumstance he faces, not the hat he should wear that corresponds precisely to the circumstance. Do not confuse what you just heard with performing many and diverse daily tasks. Of course you do many and diverse tasks every day, but my point is that too many PMO administrators do these many and diverse tasks primarily wearing the same thinking hat, thus viewing the challenge or question at hand most of the time through the wrong solution method lens. Wearing the wrong hat, get the wrong solution. Imagine that. They put beef in their mental grinder and expected pork to come out. This one hat, same hat air cannot help but render the wrong approach and solution to solving the problems at hand. Confusion reigns. At best, you tread water. One lucky step forward in PMO when your one hat fits the situation, one unlucky step backward when it doesn't. While you might easily conceptualize the need to wear multiple hats as a PMO administrator, if you have not already been in an administrative or leadership role, you may overlook or not understand a related challenge, the speed of the hat change itself, the lightning speed in which you must switch hats, the speed with which you first detect a hat switch is necessary and subsequently switch to the correct hat to engage the issue or person. As mentioned, this hat switch must be clearly communicated to the receiver. Initially, you may literally need to slow your conversation down in order to explicitly achieve the necessary hat switch clarity between yourself and the receiver, to deliberately pause the action or conversation to achieve the necessary communication clarity between all parties, until such actions become second mental nature for everyone, recognized by everyone. Further note, because of the nature of the PMO administrator's job, it is impossible for those in this position to concretely order the flow of their day, which is to say, select the hats in the proper order they must wear during the day in advance. Random order problem solving, which is to say random order hat switching, and interrupted planning is your daily norm. The administrator who can master the correct hat switch, communicate same to the receiver, combined with owning the talent required to supremely wear the correct hat now on his or her head. That is the person who will become the superior administrator or leader. Sadly, most people in management do not hat switch, perpetually switch too slowly, fight switching hats, choose the wrong hat to wear, or can't operate effectively while wearing the hat they have to wear for the task at hand. Their PMO results are predictably poor, which is to say those we are here to serve are not served as well as they should be. Morale is often predictably low in such environments, but people can't quite put their finger on the source of the problem. Why? Because culture is an invisible but no less critical force that is directly responsible for both internal morale and the quality of service provided by PMO personnel. Notice it is telling that when morale is low, employees and volunteers are aware morale is low. Why? Because internally, they know they can perform better than they are. They just lack the helping hand of a correct culture to guide them to a higher level on the job performance scale. Just imagine the boost in employee and volunteer morale when things are made right and run right. Chapter 36, on the optics of PMO. From moment to moment, the PMO administrator may be called upon, which is to also say may be viewed as a contract negotiator, department manager, entrepreneurial thinker, fundraiser, meeting chairperson, etc., and perhaps in your case, ordained clergy. Therefore, it is absolutely paramount that you do not look at every decision to be made through your preferred decision-making lens. You have no default hat to wear. Why? Only the correct lens, implicitly chosen by selecting the right hat to wear as defined by the circumstances you are facing, guides your decision-making style for each situation. Do not resist this point. Look at it this way. If you see every problem as a nail, the only tool you think you need in your toolbox is a hammer, and you can't get much more wrong in life than using a hammer on every challenge you face. But how in the world can you ever develop the senses and intuition required to do your job in a superior manner if you only see how to deal with the situations through the same lens as your preferred optics first and last choice? What if just one way, my way, is not only your default chosen way to view your PMO world, but given your attitude, it is also your only way possible? Would you ever bother to stop and ask someone else for advice when you have already convinced yourself you know what you're doing and you are doing the right thing? No. It is precisely for this reason you will have PMO problems, not because the problems are hard to detect or the practice science hard to master, but because the problems were hard for you to see correctly, much less solve correctly, if viewing all PMO matters through one lens while wearing the incorrect hat. So, how do you learn to hat switch faster and operate effectively under each hat? It's the same 3 points you interview for in job applicants. More on this point later. To learn to select the correct hat and to hat switch faster, you must, number 1, possess high intellect. Number 2, be willing to subjugate your ego. And number 3, be willing to take direction from anyone. Let us assume you have high intellect, or you wouldn't be listening to this book. But are you willing to subjugate your ego? Are you willing to take direction? Clearly note, a willingness to listen and take direction is not the same thing as actually doing what it takes to move a broken culture in a direction that rubs against your current and perhaps sanguine temperament grain. If there is no change in your behavior, you may have listened, you may have understood, but so what? Who cares? You didn't buy. You didn't internalize what is being sold. You didn't truly accept direction and convert direction into changed behavior in yourself and others. But a broken and corrupt PMO culture will never be replaced unless and until you adapt to new ways of thinking and operating. Why? Because nobody can change direction unless they first accept new directions, and the hard-headed and stubborn, by definition, refuse new directions. These chapters on culture constitute recognizing a new perspective toward PMO in general. Thus, only you can decide to act on what you have learned here. It is gut check time. Will you kill and replace your culture with the correct culture or not? Do you have the will for that task in you or not? My sincere recommendation to you here, think like the front desk person at a 5-star hotel has been trained to think. Think yes first, then find a way to accomplish the mission. How? That is up to you. Ask more questions. Challenge until satisfied. Do whatever it takes to reach a level of certainty we would label as, I am persuaded we can do this. Why? An affirmative answer carries with it from the beginning a powerful personal call to change hats, learn the ways of the new hat, and learn to effectively operate under each new hat. I can teach anyone holding points 1, 2, and 3 above how to be a superior administrator or leader. You have point 1, but do you truly have all of points 2 and 3? Specifically as it relates to the critical topic of killing the old PMO culture and replacing it with a new and correct culture.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.